Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Talk Time with Tunde. As I always say, everything is timing and it's talk time with Tunde. We have a fantastic episode today. Part 2 of the first episode we done, which was Am I My Brother's Keeper? Men Suffering in Silence. And we had a great guest on. And this week is part 2, because I had a lot of phone calls from women who were like, hold on, so are the men suffering in silence? Have you forgot the women? So we can never get the women, we can never forget the women, because without the woman, there would be no man. So I think it's fitting for us to have this side of the story. And what a guest we have for you all this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, we have UK's #1 rapid relationship therapist. She's also a positive psychology coach. She's a trauma-informed somatic healing coach and author of Amazon's #1 bestseller, Eat, Pray, Self-Love. Not only that, she is the founder of the Happiness Code. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the one, the only, the lovely, the beautiful. I know there's so many words I can use to describe her, but ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Mrs. or Miss. You have to clear that up for us, Fiona. Fiona Challis.
Hi, Tunde. Hi, everyone.
I'm so like I'm my trade is professional boxing, and fighters always talk about nerves, and I don't feel nerves, but I'm kind of nervous for this one.
You should not be nervous. You're great at this.
How are you doing, Fiona? How are you doing today?
I'm very good. And I'm loving your feminine touch with all the flowers.
Yeah. You see, it's working. Something must be working, because I'm getting all these brilliant, special people on this show, which we just bumped into it, and I'm loving it, and I'm love talking. I always love learning and hearing stories from people in all spectrums of life, and I feel that you're like the perfect person to speak about this subject because of your expertise.
Oh, thank you, Tunde, and thank you for having me on, and congratulations for starting all of this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's all great. I really want to start by you telling the Talk Time with Tunde's viewers your story. It's very sometimes we see these professionals giving advice and not realizing that they too have very, very deep, intimate lives and stories themselves to tell, which is inspiring for, in this situation, for other women. So roll away. Let's go.
Yeah, definitely. So yes, thank you for the lovely introduction about all of my professional qualifications, which is great.
Yes.
But aside from that, I am also, I came from a very big family in Ireland, in a little rural town in Ireland called Enniskillen. So we are a family of 7, 6 girls and 1 boy. So I know lots about women suffering in silence.
Yes. Wow. I think the boy might be suffering in silence as well.
or suffering in a lot of noise.
Yeah. Yes.
So I came from a very large family. Obviously went on to have my education. I went on to work in the corporate world initially. So I was a European sales director for an IT company.
Wow.
For many, many years. And then when I had my son, when he was born, I thought I just can't do corporate hours anymore. I can't do, work at all hours of the day and not be able to do pickups and be at school football matches and everything else. Yeah. So I left the corporate world and set up a business of my own, which was a sales training company, again, selling into IT. And I did that for many, many years, 16 years.
Wow.
And then when my son went to university, he's at Bristol University now. And I always said, when he goes to university, I'm going to do what I want to do and what I'm passionate about, which is retraining as a therapist and a coach. So for the last 3 years, that's what I've done. I've retrained in all of these modalities, and I'm now in my life doing passionate things that I love to do, which is helping women, mainly helping women, some men as well, but mainly helping women to overcome challenges in life.
Yes, I think you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to touch on this subject, because I come from a family I was different to everyone on my estate. Everyone on my estate was brought up by their mother, single mothers.
Right.
And I was the only one in my estate that was brought up by my father.
Really?
My whole childhood was probably, that's why we're like cats and dogs in later life. But I do feel it had a positive and a negative effect of me not having that mother's love, and me having the solid father who really was a mother as well. But of course, you can't be two. You know, you're a man for a reason and you're a woman for a reason. I think they show love in different ways. But looking back now, I can see that a lot of these mothers, they was definitely or had to be dealing with things, bringing up young children alone. And it's not a thing to, I don't know, definitely not back then, or maybe it was, for women to speak openly about the things they were going through. And I think that has an effect on the children themselves. What do you feel? Do you feel that it would have been, if women were more open about what the things they deal with, it would have affected the child in maybe a more positive way?
I think, I think, to be honest, what you're saying is very, very common these days. I mean, I also came from a single family. My father was actually an alcoholic. He was quite an abusive man. So he they split up when I was 7 and then eventually divorced when I was 13. So effectively, I was being brought up by a single mom as well. And when you're going through that as a child, you do grow up definitely feeling very different. You feel like you're different from everybody else. And then that can cause you to walk into your adult life also with some of those issues. And I think for the mothers and for the parents that are bringing up single, children by themselves, whether it's a man or a woman, that's a huge amount. It's a huge responsibility. And you almost feel like you have to put all of your time, your attention, your emotions onto the children, and actually you tend to neglect all of your own needs. So you're prioritizing everybody else apart from yourself, but then you end up not living the life you want to live either. And that's also, it leaves you feeling resentful in a way, when you don't do that. But you have to, you power on. That's what we did back then. You power on and you do it.
Yes, absolutely. One of the questions, I want to ask is, for women suffering in silence, not talking, why do these women keep seeing the same destructive patterns in relationships?
Yeah. So, the thing about women in comparison to men, women do talk. That's the great thing. So women are great in fact, women know more about each other than probably anybody else, because we do tend to get together. We do tend to talk a lot more. But what we don't talk about is the things that perhaps we're holding some shame about. And when you're growing up, in your childhood, when you're growing up, the way to look at it is like this. So can you see this? Am I holding it right?
Yes.
So I always use this in all of my seminars. So when you come onto this planet as a woman, you're coming on as this beautiful, shiny diamond. You're just pure, you're raw, you're beautiful. You're just coming on this beautiful, authentic person. But when you grow up, what happens is we are wired for love and connection. We're human beings. We need to have relationships. We need to feel like we fit in. We need to feel like we belong. And in that caregiving space, in that family space where you were being brought up, if you didn't feel like you fitted in, if you didn't feel like you belong, if love and connection wasn't readily available to you, what happens is, as children, is we learn how to adapt. So we adapt in order to survive. So we end up molding ourselves into these roles that will help us to get more love and connection. So the 4 kind of key roles that women tend to take on is either the role of the carer, where they find love and connection by neglecting their own needs and caring for everybody else. So they'll care for everybody in the family.
Yes.
Very common one for women. The second one is the rebel, where they might be the outspoken one, and actually they get love and connection because they're more outspoken. The third one is the sick one, where they learned very quickly that they got more love and connection when they were sick. And then the fourth one is the overachiever. So the one who always did really well at school and always got top marks and was always able to fix everything or rescue people or solve those problems. And because they take on those roles, Tunde, what happens is in their adult life, they then take that role into relationships. So as an example, if you took on the role of being the carer, you would go into adult relationships and you would end up people pleasing. You would be overgiving. You'd be using those destructive patterns in relationships because you've never known any better since a child. That's what you're doing. So until you break that pattern, until you break that cycle, unfortunately, women do carry on those destructive patterns into relationships. I did as well. You know, I was an overachiever when I was growing up. So you tend to go in and fix everything and rescue everybody. But it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And you think you're doing the right thing, but actually you're neglecting yourself.
Yes, because I like, even like with my own mother, like I was always, I guess even, I don't even think it's like a necessarily an environment thing, because I hear a lot of people talking about the same thing about their mother, like the words what you use, people pleasing and over giving. You're like, Mum, stop giving this woman, like you're giving this woman more than what you're giving yourself. And it's quite interesting to hear that you're saying it stems from, you know, the past, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I work with women every day of the week now, Tunde, and I can guarantee you all of those patterns, they all come back to childhood. And when you do that inner work and you actually trace it all back, you'll find it does all come from there.
Okay, well, you know, this is a solution show. That's what I like to call this. Not problems. We know what the problems are. We want the solutions. Like, how do women who are suffering silence, how do they heal from the past? I feel like, because sometimes I feel like it's, some women may feel like they're the only one going through this. And because of this is where the silence comes from. Like, how do they heal from all this?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing to realize is, honestly, for any ladies watching this show, you are not the only one that's going through.
They need to hear that. They need to hear that.
But honestly, everybody feels it. And that's why, you know, women can talk about everything, but if they feel they're the only woman that's going through this, that's the part they don't talk to each other about. So the first thing to understand is you are not the only person going through this. There are so many women all going through exactly the same thing. And then the second thing to realize is actually that was a really good survival and coping mechanism for you when you were growing up. It worked really well for you. So it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you need to be fixed. It means you had a very, very clever little girl, which we now call an inner child, who actually did a really good job of adapting to get the love and connection she needed. She's just confused with how to get love and connection as an adult now. So all we have to do is unlearn what we had and relearn how to get love and connection and actually put your own needs first as well. So it's unlearning and relearning.
This is excellent. Tell us a little bit about, I don't know if you've touched it, but the 3 most common limiting beliefs that women hold.
Definitely.
To hear that.
They always come down, I promise you, to 3 key ones.
Yes, and that's what I'm so interested. I'm sure a lot of women would, because you know the reason why the thing is for me is that it's like I'm talking about myself now. For years in boxing, I've had this perception that others outside of the sport looked at me a particular way.
Yeah,
that may be true, but time has shown me that most people think the same thing. And unless you actually go out and meet these other trainers, other fighters, and you see that you have common beliefs and common, perceptions. So, I really want to know what the common limiting beliefs are that women hold. The three most common.
You've already mentioned the first one, which is I'm different. So a lot of people feel I'm different and I can't connect. And that's kind of one of the key ones that come out. The second one is I'm not lovable. And a lot of women feel that way. And the third one is I'm not enough or I'm not worthy. So they're the key ones. I mean, honestly, every woman I work with, when it all boils down to the nitty gritty of what's really going on in there, it's normally one of those. I'm different, I'm not enough, or I'm not lovable.
Off subject, do you think that one of them points what you just said, I'm not lovable? What's your take on the whole social media thing and women? Because I say this because last week, Mr. Flores that was on, he showed two pictures. Yeah. One of when he just lost his father, and the other one a photo shoot. And the one, obviously, the photo shoot, he was smiling and what have you. And the photo on the left was him when he just lost his father. And he said basically that's how life was. There's two sides to a story. So I say that to say that on social media nowadays, you see women. Like, what's your is it that thing? I'm not saying every woman's posting because they don't feel loved, but do you feel that has a lot to do with it, and women feel that they have to post pictures of themselves?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I think there's a huge amount of pressure for women and for men today because what you see on social media is not real. People have their social media mask and they have their real life mask, and what you're seeing is not real. But when you're a young impressionable, sometimes naive little girl growing up, when you're a 12, 13-year-old girl and you're seeing all these women on social media, the way they're posting, the way they're showing what life's like, it's not real, and it's a huge amount of pressure, I think, especially for the younger generation, for the young women in the world today. There's a huge amount of pressure on those girls today.
Yes, absolutely. Man,
you can't keep them away from it.
It's impossible. What advice can you really give to these? I mean, you've made. Oh, that's the point I was saying. You have 9. You've developed. I think it's actually called a happiness code, right? Am I right?
Happiness code, yeah.
And without giving your system away for free, because you got to buy it. It's on. I believe it's on Amazon or what have you. Just give us a brief rundown of the keys to happiness. I remember speaking to you offline. You were saying to me, which is something which I've always said, which I promote, and people look at me different or have looked at me different for it, and I'm never going to change. It's loving yourself.
Love yourself.
I just believe that's how a woman, me personally, I'm not an expert in any way, but whether you're a woman or a man, we are speaking about women now, but I do believe it's that self-love that they need. They need to love yourself, because if I'm not mistaken, if you love yourself, it's easy to love others.
Absolutely. I mean, and the reason I actually called the book, and you see
yes, and put it up there. Let me see the books, Fiona. We're selling this.
Did you see it?
Fantastic. You can get on Amazon. It's called Eat, Pray, Self-Love.
Self-love, because you can't have love unless you have self-love first. And I think it's so important because, especially for young girls today, they think, when you go into a marriage or you go into a relationship, it's going to be all love and roses and everything's going to be perfect. If you don't love yourself first, it's never going to be perfect. So that's why it has to be eat, pray, self-love, and then go into love. And what I have found with even my own journey, Tunde, because I wrote the book based on my own experience. I was married and I divorced my ex-husband many years ago, actually, when our son was only 3 years old. I've had some disastrous relationships after that.
Yes.
Disastrous.
Yes. As we all have, I guess.
As we all have. But,
Yes.
honestly, it was only when I started to do the work on myself and that I
Yes.
actually began to realize, hang on, I'm holding on to all these issues from the past. There was wounds from my childhood I hadn't even healed. I had a very anxious attachment style, which, meant I was people pleasing a lot and overgiving a lot. I had definitely got programming and patterns like limiting beliefs that we mentioned earlier. They were affecting all of my relationships. There was a lot of old protector parts that I was hanging on to that actually weren't serving me anymore. In fact, they were hurting all of my relationships that I was in. Yes. And then you have that inner child, that inner child work that we talked about earlier. We've regulating the whole body, so not just the spirit and the mind, but also regulating your body and working with your nervous system. As fighters and boxers, you'll be aware of that. And taking more of a kind of embodied approach to healing. So you're healing all of you, not just part of you. And then making sure that you actually understand, what does a secure self me look like? What do I want to be like? What's my ideal life? And then spending that time on real self-love to make that life happen. And when you take the first letter of all of those points, Tunde, it spells happiness, which is where the happiness code came from. It's literally the steps that you have to go through to kind of unlearn the past, relearn who you want to be today, and actually start to love yourself so that you can then be loved by others.
Yes.
And hence we call it the happiness code.
That's a fantastic way, that's brilliant. And it's that thing, because I don't know, I was never really a judgmental person anyway. I think that's just the way my dad brought me up. But the older I get and the more experience I have, I can see that there's always something underlining to a person's behavior. Yeah. And that's what we need to let people understand. And that's why it's so great to have you on, because I know that there'll be women who are watching this, that probably now would look on things different because of what you're saying, obviously, and just realizing that they're not alone.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And honestly, the best thing that any woman watching this can do, the best thing you can do is heal yourself, love yourself, because then you're teaching your kids what a fantastic example, because you're teaching them to love themselves and you're teaching them to be happy. And honestly, I'm so passionate, and I hope you can hear it in my voice. I am so passionate about the happiness code that every child, I think every single child at school should be brought through these steps, because if children can learn from a much younger age, actually it's okay. I'm not different to anybody else. I am enough. I am lovable. And if they can learn how to regulate their nervous system, if they can learn how to cope with things when things happen, because that's what life's about, things are going to happen. If they can learn these at a much younger age, gosh, our future will be so different.
This is so serendipity. I think that's one of the first
words. I love that. My favorite word, serendipity.
Yes, serendipity is one of my favorite words. And it's a word you first used when we spoke on Saturday when it was coming up for the run. But I say that to say, just this morning, just out of the blue, my co-trainer Adeola Yinka, he said, T, do you know any sports psychologists? And I said, well, I'm not too sure if it's the same thing, but I know I'm having a conversation this afternoon with a positive psychology coach. Yeah. And I said and I was like, who's that for? Is that for Bobby, like his little boy who's a footballer? And he said, yeah. And I said, you know what? That's brilliant, because even though he's so young, it just ties into what you said. I think that the younger they start to understand
absolutely
that they're not different from one another. So I know,
especially in sports, Tunde, because it's so bloody hard, isn't it? I mean, my wee boy, he was a footballer as well when he was growing up, and the amount of rejection that they get, the amount of, oh, you're not good enough, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, the amount of limiting beliefs that kids in sports form about themselves it's so damaging to them. So when you have something like teach them positive psychology methods, teach them ways to think, if I don't score the goal or if I don't get in the team, how do I pick myself back up again? So teaching kids that at such a young age is so crucial. Yeah. I believe it is.
Yeah. I always, one of the things, where I come from, the inner cities and where most people come from, even like from when you grew up, a lot of people, I think, when they hear this mental health issue and ways of getting help, automatically they think about money. Yeah. They think, I can't afford the cost of a psychologist and everything. What steps can they do within their own self and their own environment to help them, not suffer in silence? Women, this is I'm talking.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, I think, when people are saying I can't afford it, what most people are actually saying there is, I don't think I'm worth investing in myself to put that money
there
into
you go.
myself.
There you go.
Normally, it's always, I'm not worth it. You see, it comes back to that thing again. I'm not worth investing in myself.
Yes.
Even if it's going to help me.
Yes.
So I would question, first of all, is it really a financial difficulty, or is it that actually you don't believe you're worth investing in yourself? But the second thing is, there's so much free therapy out there today, Tunde. Like, I do so much free stuff. You can look me up on Instagram, Facebook. As therapists and coaches today, it's how we grow our following. You can go on to any positive psychology coach's website or therapist. There's so much free therapy out there today. So just go and research it if you can't afford it.
Well, there you go, women. You've heard it. So there's the women and Peckham, North Peckham Estate, East Dulwich Estate, where I grew up. I don't want to hear no excuses. It is, and it's that thing I was saying to someone the other day about a cost of a service, and he's like, that's expensive. And now, same thing what you just said. I said, well, then you're saying you don't want to invest in yourself. You don't believe in yourself. You don't feel like you're worthy to invest, because when you do the mathematics of it, they'll probably spend £100 a week on cigarettes or something like that. Use that to, help yourself and benefit yourself.
Absolutely. But I think as well, when you grow up, I mean, I grew up from a very poor family income as well. Yes. So I know what it's like. But when you grow up in a family where, you were on the poverty line, we were definitely on the poverty line in Ireland. When you grow up with no money, you learn from a very young age, any money you do get, hang on to it.
Yes.
Keep it safe, but you'll never know when you're going to need it. Or some people go the other way and they go, not comfortable with money, just get rid of it. And then they spend it on everything.
Yes.
But when it comes to spending it on themselves and investing in something like therapy or coaching, that's where the limiting beliefs pop back up again. That goes, I'm not worth that. I'll buy the new clothes, but I'm not worth investing in myself for therapy and coaching.
It's funny, I'm listening to I feel like I'm on a game show. You know all the answers before you go on the game show, and then when you actually on the game show, you forget everything that you would have.
I got
it. That's how I feel now, because and we were saying this that moving forward, we're gonna ask the panel, like the people, to have questions that they want to ask. But I just feel that you've explained things so well this afternoon. I don't think there are many questions that you haven't answered, but I don't think you actually told us why you came into this business. Why? Did you say that? I don't think you actually told us why you came into this business and what was the catalyst. I know you said it was in IT, but I don't want to dig too deep and be too personal.
Oh, I wrote a book about it, so I'm very open. It's okay.
But what I want the people to know that, again, you said it right there. You come from a poor background, because sometimes the perception, even from where I'm from, when they see people like yourself, they think it was all garden of roses, and I think it's important that you explain and your background and where you've come from, where you have briefly touched on it, but your story.
Yeah. I mean, you know, obviously I had the IT company and I spent a lot of time in the corporate world and stuff like that. But the reason I actually retrained as a therapist and coach is I literally hit a point in my life, in my own personal life 3 years ago, where I had a very unfortunate experience of being in a relationship with a narcissist, a very toxic man. And I didn't see it. I was completely blindsided. I had no idea that this man was who he was. And it literally broke my heart. You know, I'm very open. I say it in the book. It just knocked me for six. You know, I'm normally a very confident, I'm normally a very outgoing person. And this just broke me. It just literally, everything in my life stopped. Everything started to go wrong. And I just thought, I have to find out why this keeps happening, because this wasn't the first bad relationship I'd had since my divorce. And I thought, the only constant in all of those relationships is me. That's the only constant that's in them. And I thought, I'm going to have to work on myself here, because I'm not going through that shit again.
Trust me. No, come on. You want to be on our show? You're allowed to speak. It's freedom of speech on this show.
Perfect.
How do you?
What I did.
I mean, you know, one of your in your job descriptions is that you're a positive psychology coach. Yes. How essential is it to a healing of a woman that's suffering, having that right positive mindset?
Oh, so important. But also the difference with positive psychology and psychology, Tunde, is normal traditional psychology focuses on what's wrong with you. Yes. Positive psychology is completely the opposite. We focus on what's right with you.
Okay.
So when you're going through this, so like when I was going through my journey, yes, I did need to have therapy to go back into my past to find out why are all these things wrong with me? Why did I have an anxious attachment style? You know, where did I get all these limiting beliefs from? So you do need therapy and psychology to help heal the past. But it's positive psychology that actually brings you into the present and the future, because you're now saying, okay, well, we've worked on what was wrong. We've unlearned it. Now we're going to relearn what's right with us. And when you start to focus on what's right with you rather than what's wrong with you, life becomes a very different place.
That you see, that is just so. I think I actually wrote that down, because that is something. It's so amazing to me how, you know, people just have the same thoughts and
we have negativity bias. You are always wired to focus on the negative side. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? Why isn't that going right? But if you turn it around the other way, like one of the things I do is I keep a positivity ratio journal every day. So how many of the things I did or I thought or I said were positive versus negative. And if you train yourself to become more like that, you're going to find so much in your life that's actually going well.
Yes, because I guess repetition is the key as well. I think finally, I asked, I heard you say something on a video, is like, and it was, you cannot change what you don't understand.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that hit a nerve, because it's when you look at somebody or somebody going through something, if they don't understand it, just explain that, what you meant when you said you cannot change what you don't understand, Fiona.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know who came up with that saying, first of all, Tunde? Joe Dispenza.
Oh man, that's our guy.
Joe Dispenza, don't you?
That's our guy. And anyone who is not familiar with the works of Joe Dispenza, you need to familiarize yourself.
He's awesome. Joe. He's awesome. But yeah, he was the one that actually quoted that, you know, and it's so true, because if your subconscious mind doesn't understand why you had attachment issues, why you had these limiting beliefs, why things were the way they were, you can't reprogram it. So you first of all need to understand what's happening, then change it, and then focus on what's right with you, not what's wrong with you. But you can't change anything until you dig in and you do the inner work and you understand it first. And when you do, it's much easier to change. The problem is people see it as scary. They go, sometimes I'd rather go behind this little mask and just carry on with life the way it is. and they're too scared to go in and do the inner work. But actually, when you do it with a trained professional, when you do it, you know, with somebody who's there as a nice empathetic witness to go through it with you, it's actually not that bad to go back. And you're not going to relive anything. You're just going to revisit it quickly. Why did it happen to me? And let's bring you back into the present.
Yes.
But people get scared.
Yes, that's it. And I would say in closing, I think you've covered it already, but in closing, what is the final thing you would say to the women out there that are suffering in silence?
I would say to every woman who is listening to this, you are not in silence, darling. You might be in silence to yourself, but there are lots of other women going through exactly what you're going through. Don't do it by yourself, darling. Come and speak to somebody like us. Come and join one of our communities, because when you find out that there are so many other women exactly where you are, feeling exactly what you're feeling, you're going to feel so much better about yourself. And if you're really struggling, honestly, reach out to me. I do a free 30-minute clarity call for anybody who's struggling. So, Tunde, I'll give you a link, and anyone who is struggling, pick up the phone and have a chat with me, because there is nothing worth suffering in silence for. Not in today's world, but there's so much help available to all of us.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you, Fiona Challis, not the poison chalice, the golden chalice.
The golden chalice.
The Golden Chalice, UK's #1 rapid relationship therapist, positive psychology coach, trauma-informed somatic healing coach, and author of Amazon's #1 bestseller, which I'm selling here on The Fight Is Right. I'm gonna let Manny put up something like we've got to get this book out there to millions of women that need it, of the #1 bestseller, Eat, Pray, and Self-Love. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you to everyone
Fiona.
listening as well.